When we set out to build Diablo IV, we knew that there were elements of all of our past games that we wanted to include, and with regard to the darkness specifically, we felt that a lot of the elements in Diablo II spoke to that in a way that was really sort of the essence of the franchise, and we wanted to capture that again with Diablo IV. So in terms of the tone of the events that take place in the game, our quests, our story, in terms of the literal amount of light in dungeons in many cases, with our PBR system, lighting system, which gives the realistic lighting, we've gone through a lot of work to make the darkness feel present and set the tone and mood for what's going on, while still making the combat clear in combat spaces, which is requires a lot of careful tuning and work. So from the words that you see and the voices that you hear, to the tone of the content that you're playing, to the stakes in the world, to the darkness that you're seeing in terms of the color tones, we've really tried to recapture what is great about the sort of sense of being in the world of Sanctuary with D4.
I think a big part of it, when you think about you go back to the history of what Diablo 1 and 2 were, and sort of especially 1 was this notion of it was a kind of a cult classic, kind of niche game because it was dark. It was kind of the forbidden game you shouldn't necessarily play, or you weren't allowed to play from your parents. And, as you look at the evolution of the franchise from 1 to 2 to 3 and becoming a little bit more mainstream, where Diablo 3, I think, is probably the most mainstream version of the Diablo games, that idea that now, in today's day and age, that darkness or that tone, that maturity is actually mainstream now. When you look at The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Sons of Anarchy, it's no longer this forbidden thing you have to play, not let your parents know you're playing it or whatever. And so I think this really gave us an opportunity to go back and revisit what was core. I was sort of, whenever I try to, try to think of it, the pithy way to go, what's D4? And because of the way that the team has brought such a reverence to the past of the franchise, as well as new innovations, I always sort of think of it as sort of an equation. To me, it's the dark tone of Diablo 1, meets the progression of Diablo 2, meets the visceral combat of Diablo 3, and with the new innovations of Diablo 4, with things like open world and and a lot more choice in the gameplay and the game itself. And so to me, that it's that return to darkness, though I think it's a great way to talk about the franchise. If you're familiar with the franchise, it speaks to the fact that darkness is mainstream and you can be that dark and popular now. But it's a respect to the past, and I think it's an opportunity to reach a bunch of players who didn't have that opportunity 25 years ago to play D1.
Blessed Mother, Save us.
So we started with a couple of classes, and we had some really cool ideas for class mechanics that would be specific to those classes. And it proved to be very compelling, not just in terms of the gameplay of the class, but also, you know, if you're playing a barbarian and then maybe you're grouped up with a sorceress, and the sorceress is using her class mechanic, it really, you look at that and you're like, oh, well, there's lots of really interesting gameplay there that I could check out, you know, in the future, maybe on a future season or something like that. And so we really wanted the classes to shine in their own ways and differentiate from each other. And then also it goes back to that aspect of choice. Like when we look at the class mechanics, we try to design them in ways that increase the number of meaningful choices and ways that you can customize your character. So if you look at the Necromancer, for example, right, the Book of the Dead allows for players who, you know, the Necromancer is a core part of Diablo as a franchise, right? It's this really cool summoner class that ends up being really fundamental to gameplay. You can approach monsters in a totally different way with all of your minions, like getting in the way of projectiles, tanking monsters. You get this really cool fantasy of being this sort of general of the dead. But there are lots of different ways that people have played Necromancers in the franchise, right? You've got people who enjoyed playing Necromancers in Diablo II, where they're kind of overseeing the battlefield and their minions are doing all of the combat. You've got this is a more action-packed Necromancer of Diablo III, where you're like really sort of commanding your minions more directly. And you've got players as well who want to play this sort of dark caster fantasy, but aren't necessarily attached to the army aspect of it, even though that's a big draw of the Necromancer.
Corpse explosion is cool, just in general.
Absolutely, yeah. And who doesn't want to explode corpses, right? So when you look at the class mechanics, we designed Book of the Dead to allow players to customize their Necromancer to speak to that class fantasy. So you can do things like sacrifice your minions. You can adjust which ones, like I really want to have a golem, but I don't want to have skeletons. I want to have skeletons, but not a golem. I want to have the biggest army I can. And there are trade-offs and interesting choices that can be made all through that.
And it's interesting that it's like, to me, it's around adding depth without trying to add too much complexity. You know, you look at the Sorceress one with the enchantment system, it's incredibly powerful to have the ability for different skills fire based on what you're doing, whether it's like you're bringing down a blizzard every 10 seconds or your certain lightning is coming out of you or those sorts of things, but they're kind of, in a way, a passive ability. I don't have to trigger it. It's triggering based on either a condition or based on time. And similar to the Necromancer's Book of the Dead is allowing you to customize and configure your army. It's not adding complexity necessarily to, oh, I have to worry about how I control differently. And so it makes things richer and more customizable, because now even if I'm a fire sorceress and you're a fire sorceress, the fact that what we put into our chance slots could make it very different in how we play and how we build upon that, and gives us access to like a couple more skills, which normally you'd be limited by your skill bar. And so that notion of that each class has a way to go deeper into the class fantasy and do it in a way that doesn't mean like, oh, now I have 6 more buttons I have to press or whatever. Like, it keeps it deep and interesting and custom without overwhelming you.
The skill trees have evolved dramatically over the course of development, I would say.
We're on number 4?
Many iterations. And a lot of it has come, you know, one of our strategies here has been to like really share as much as we can with the fans as often as we can. So we've gone out with and talked about like, here's where our skill trees are in our, you know, in very like our blog updates and like when we go to show off the game. And we've gotten lots of feedback like I want to have more choices, or, you know, I want to have lots of other options. And so out of that have come like a number of revisions to the skill tree, both for making it clear how you can progress through it, making it work for new players, and ways to increase the depth. And that's where we get into the Paragon system, which comes online as you level up and get into the higher levels. And we've really tried to hit that sweet spot where we're providing all of the opportunity for choice while not overwhelming players who, are looking at this big map of skills and asking where to start, right?
I love theory crafting. That's one of the things that draws me to these types of games is how do I make a build? How do I set up skills? How do I make things work together? And you want a lot of depth there so that you have a lot of choice, so we're not just making the same build all the time. We're both fire sorcerers, and that we know exactly what skills we're using. And so you want enough choice there that you can kind of customize it, make it feel unique to yourself, but not, there's games where you would go into it and you go like, oh, that's way too complicated. Just go look up a website. Tell me what I have to put in. I'll print, the old days, and I'm old enough. I used to print it out and bring it to my thing and go like, okay, put a node here, put a node there, and I was just making somebody else's build because the way you made a build was so complicated. I couldn't feel like I could own the theory crafting. And that's, I think, a line that we've been walking is trying to make sure that you have lots of choices, both active and passive skills, but is still sort of grokkable that you can go and theory craft yourself and you can still create your own build. And I think as a player, when I first came to the D4 skill tree, I felt that notion of that, what I talked about with the equation of that progression of D2 is, I really feel the D2 skill tree, that notion of inherited, there's an inheritance there from skill to skill that you can take certain skills that impact other skills, and so you can kind of build on top of them the way that you used to be able to do in D2. And so I think that's really that notion of that the richness of the progression that was in D2, I feel that richness in D4.
You talked about skills, connecting to other skills and building off of them. That's another area where we've gone through a lot of iteration, right, to make those connections clear. Because you don't have the connection where, a skill is literally below this other skill and you must take one point in this and then that you saw in D2. But you have all of these sort of natural connections between things like the skill causes bleeding and this skill benefits from bleeding. And so we've built this skill tag system. We've authored this ability to search the skill tags so you can highlight nodes that are related to that, and so you can sort of see how these things are interconnected, and it sort of assists the player in oh, there's some really cool interactions here to check out.
Yeah, give me all the skills that have bleeding in it, or would benefit bleeding, and then you go, oh, okay, I didn't know that one was going to help it.
So you can respec point by point. You can directly in the skill tree for gold, and that gold cost ramps up at some rate as you level up. So as you more clearly define your build and get more things that are associated with it and supporting it, it becomes a little bit more expensive to respec, but still doable. So those choices have meaning. And at the early part of the game, it's very, very inexpensive, very small gold cost. So you feel I'm going to try this skill. I didn't like that.
Change my clothes real quick, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a very clear way of doing it, the kind of paper doll model. But one of the goals, the design goals, not to speak for Joe, but one of the design goals is really to make your build feel inherent to your character. And that's one of the things about the gold cost going up over time is that basically there's going to be a point in time where I'll make up a number, but say at level 50, there's going to be a point in time where you go oh, I would like to be a different barbarian, but it's too expensive to undo everything I've done. It's actually better for me to roll another barbarian and start a new one and go fresh. And we wanted that notion that with each level you progress down a character, you're kind of becoming more and more attached to it and getting more and more sort of settled with it, so that you're not just going, okay, I'm level 65 and now I'm just going to change my clothes and become a completely different barbarian, So cheap in the beginning, so lots of experimentation. Do I like fire? Do I like ice? Do I like lightning? Yes, no, turn it off. And I also love the fact that you can get skills through equipment that you can access the skills before maybe you would even be able to from a level perspective, and go, oh, I picked up this skill on my sword or my boots, and I'm going to go try it out and see if I like it or not. So I love that ability to go in and buy a skill and feel no regret in paying for it with in-game gold to get rid of it. But then wow, I got, once you get up there, you're level 90, you're going like, I think I'm just going to, I think I'm not going to try to spend a million, whatever it's going to be to undo all these skills. So I love that sort of sense of, I don't know, hardening cement. It's like over time, there's a sense of permanence that starts to happen the further deeper you go into that character.
Protocol will, in fact, scare the pants off of all of us. There will be no more pants.
What is fear?
Fear is such a basic part of who we are.
Where is it created?
Atmosphere in a game like this is everything. It's terrifying, but it's beautiful.
And how can we use it?
With horror, there's no rules.
Glenn Schofield and the developers of the Calisto Protocol invite you to join them and some very special icons of horror.
I think it goes back to the earliest times around a campfire.
The perfect horror experience is something that scares the piss out of me.
Think of it as a roller coaster. I want it to make me feel things. I want it to startle me.
They're all magic tricks. That's what we're doing in the movies.
As they discuss crafting the perfect horror experience.
The 5 tenets of horror for the Calisto Protocol are brutality,
atmosphere,
Tension.
Helplessness.
and humanity.
The Calisto Protocol is mastering horror.
Brutality is part of that shock value. And shock is just one of the emotions of horror, right? And so I kind of look for those to affect people a little bit.
What we wanted the project to be was really about looking at films and games and kind of thinking about how we wanted our project to sit within those.
We watch these movies, and it does give you a feeling.
It was a lot of fun because there was a lot of research.
When you sit down on the couch or go to the movie theater to watch a movie, you're experiencing someone else's story, and you can feel things by experiencing that story, and it can be very moving, but there's always going to be a distance between you and that character. One of the things that video games does that I think heightens things for storytelling purposes is it puts you in the center of that story. So you are the one performing tasks. You are the one succeeding when the character succeeds.
I think the growth in that is exponential. I think it's going to be massive, even from where it is now.
Whoever the next George Lucas is, he, she, they, at 13 years old, they have a controller in their hands.
It's an experience that is unrivaled in other forms of entertainment.
There are 2 movies, Hostel and Martyrs, in which there was a scene in each one that were so brutal that it affected me. Like for a couple of weeks, I'm like, oh, gee, just thinking about it, I'm like, man, that was really brutal.
The concept of brutality is, well, it's certainly useful.
Brutality is a very specific kind of trauma. It is usually senseless. It usually has a visceral, almost excessive amount of violence to it.
They don't pull punches at all in this game, and I was like, whoa, Glenn, Scott, Chris, you guys are crazy.
We wanted to get to something that felt very raw, very real for the player, and that's a fantastic tool for really sort of cutting through the noise in some respects, for connecting with people and evoking that kind of almost like lizard brain reaction of terror and fear to what's happening on screen.
conflict is drama, and physical conflict, aka brutality, is the most primal form of conflict, and it's something that everyone can understand.
We have to be very, very careful with it. You know, you see somebody come along and chop somebody else's head off, like Tom Savini did in Friday the 13th. Well, that had never been done before. It became like a magic trick. You say, how did they do that? But it's gone, and then you go forward.
I do the same thing a magician does. A magician is trying to make you believe that what you're seeing is really happening. Well, that's what we're doing in the movies.
We do have a lot of parts coming off and dismemberment and all of that. We have bones showing off, but it's not like, oh, this game is about showing the bones. No, I think it's about the combination.
This is really about survivorship. I've got to bone up. I actually have to match that level of violence. I have to become offensive.
It also so crosses a line from civilized behavior that it lets you know that in this story, this is the world we are in now.
You know, you really have to put your characters through the ringer in horror. If you have a guy trying to get from point A to point B, you know, that's a story. You can have conflicts happen along the way. If he's got a broken leg and his bones hanging out, the story's about 10 times more interesting, to me at least.
I'm just trying to give you a chance at rebirth.
In creature design, no matter how fanciful, if you have one toe in reality, maybe, you're going to fare better than if you are doing something that is a complete flight of fantasy.
You know, Biophage didn't just happen. It took a lot of like nuances and drawings and sketches and 3D pieces and stuff like that. And then I realized, personally, the thing that scares me the most is a deranged human.
When you make a character that is 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, 2 eyes, you're building familiarity into it. Does that make it more or less scary?
There is something a lot more terrifying about being able to look at a creature, seeing that there's a human, relatable side, right? That could be me. You have to come up with the style and what are these creatures? What are the roots of these creatures? Are they aliens? Is it something biological? Is it something that's evolved? You know, you have to kind of set down those roots first.
We want to ground everything we do, so we want people to believe on what they see, and that kind of breaks the barrier on thinking that it's just another game or just like something created.
Glauco's amazing, not just his creative eye, but also just, you know, his mind and the way that he has taken the human form and turned it on its ear, kind of giving you this kind of twisted humanity vibe with bones growing out, and teeth growing out, and eyes turning into something different.
My favorite, which I played a huge role in that one personally, I had a lot of fun sculpting, is Big Mouth. Is the guy that we see in the first trailer, and we see it a couple of times in the other demos too. He has a really big mouth, and he has like very long teeth, and you know, there's a lot of saliva and like goo like coming out of his mouth.
I don't know how many versions we did of him. Well, not in 3D, but we probably have about 50 different designs of him.
Yeah, that one is my favorite, maybe for bias reasons, but.
We wanted a 2-head that was split in half right from the very beginning, and those are still there.
There are some other ones that we haven't revealed yet that are really, really exciting too. That I can't wait for the players to see it.
Our combat experience is really getting close to these creatures, and we show full detail. We don't hold anything back.
A lot of it was picking melee as the 50% of our gameplay, you are very close to enemies. You're always within reach of them, and so you're in danger. That also is a way to show the brutality right in front center stage. So as we're doing these melee hits, you're seeing that reaction. Our camera's close up to the enemy, to you. So you see the arm pop off, you see the blood.
Our gore system plays a big role in showcasing brutality.
It's basically a system that scales through enemies, through environmental hazards, and basically allows the enemies to get dismembered, to spawn blood, to have the deaths.
Like if I hit someone with a bat, stun baton, like how's that arm gonna fall? If I shoot him in the head, like is it going to explode?
We have a lot of tools built into the system that we can, achieve all of these different things.
Oh shit!
That's the direction that we wanted to take. So in that vein, we just went to the supermarket and we were buying a bunch of different types of meat. Something with more fresh, more red, something with more fascia. Fascia is the tissue that covers muscles.
We worked very closely with Jorge throughout the process.
He's so passionate. What he did was he bought a light box and then he put the chicken breast on the light box and it's actually measuring lighting values, physical lighting values from it.
We bring the meat into here, into the studio. We place them on a light rig and we just make the lights spin. And we basically have an image for every single light direction. And that allows us to understand how this tissue is reacting to light. So we can understand how to actually replicate that in the game.
His passion and dedication, I have not seen anywhere else.
So we went to actually pierce our finger a little bit to get some blood in there. And then we actually recorded how the blood will change over time to understand all the range of colors that blood can have, from very fresh to how it looks like after 45, 1 hour. And we have that, we made that available for artists as reference.
Jorge has definitely pushed a lot of boundaries when it comes to, fidelity and visual improvements.
He is a spectacular engineer.
The dodge system is very important to our game because it really separates us from a lot of other games in the horror genre.
What that is if you hold left on the left stick while an enemy's attacking, you will dodge their attack. And if they come back again and hit you again, you have to hit right. If you don't have the rhythm right, then you will get hit. The other thing it allows us is our AI is relentless. They will not stop coming for you.
So if you shot them in the legs, you blew off both their legs. Well, that doesn't mean they're dead. Now they're crawling at you. And if they're crawling coming at you, if you can't shoot them, well, hit them on top of the head. Boom!
So we are building this world full of fear, full of horror, and then when you fight an enemy, you get a satisfaction of ripping off the enemy's head. It's just really trying to enhance that they are very brutal with you. You can be brutal with them, but they will be brutal back.
It shows consequence, right? You don't only see the threat, you can really understand what's gonna happen if that's going to be reaching to you and it's going to be defeating you.
And that's where we have a lot of fun because we want the player to feel oh man, did I just die like that? Oh, this is horrible. This is so disgusting.
We've got some real cool death scenes for Jacob. Really special.
It's really about seeing what happens to us when we lose against creatures. We show every single detail in that. That's what really drives that experience for us.
Most games don't reward you for dying. They just give you a nice "you are dead" and then take you back. No, we want to even reward you for dying. We think that's fun to do. It's a little bit of light relief in a failure moment, and we think they're very kind of collectible from the player point of view as well.
I'm looking forward to the YouTube video supercut of all of our deaths because I'm looking forward to that because I don't think I've seen them all back to back and just looking forward to that video.
One more.
We want to be scared shitless, without suffering the negative consequences of it in reality. Our mind wants to understand the world in a greater sense without putting our bodies in danger.
We handle it better when we can find significance. We can find meaning in it. And good storytelling will help us find that purpose in really straightforward ways.
Characters striving to succeed against all odds. I mean, that's really the secret sauce of storytelling, and horror does that, I think, better than almost any genre, and brutality is a huge element to that.
И хора, само да кажа, че другият месец ще направя пълна поредица на тази игра. Очаквайте съвсем скоро.
This is Athia, home to treacherous landscapes, corrupted beasts, and menacing threats. To survive in this wicked environment, Frey must learn how to master an arsenal of magical abilities. There are multiple types of spells Frey can learn to deploy, and each type of magic will have its own array of attack, support, and parkour skills. Frey will have access to the base spells of each magic type, with powerful upgrades available to earn by collecting mana. At the onset of her journey, Frey discovers the earth-based purple magic. The quick attack spell for this magic is known as Shock, and by charging up Shock, Frey can unleash more powerful attacks. Burst Shot fires clusters of explosive rock. Shield Shot creates a defensive barrier while charging and explodes into smaller particles when released. Scatter Shot unloads a steady stream of rocks, then quickly triggers a high-impact, long-range projectile. Frey's purple magic also provides her with support spells that come in handy in a variety of ways. For example, Prime sets up explosive traps. Screen generates a force field, and Tendril heals, based on how much damage it does. For more defensive-minded players, Frey has a host of abilities that provide her with survivability in battle. Learning how to dodge attacks with magic parkour is the key to defeating the corrupted threats of Athia. But when she does get struck, Frey's trusty sidekick Cuff will take the hit to reduce the damage dealt and create an opportunity for a counterattack. Cuff can also be extremely useful before any enemy encounter occurs. With Cuff's assistance, Frey can scan the area for nearby points of interest and potential threats. Additionally, Cuff can examine enemies to provide valuable intel on their strengths and weaknesses. Later into Frey's journey, she will unlock fire-based red magic, and these spells open up new ways to play. Spells like Fusilla, Aegis, and Legion are strong defensive options. But sometimes a strong offense is the best defense. Red magic gives Frey the ability to unleash some devastating melee attacks. The quick attack spell for red magic bestows Frey with a magical blade called Slice. A charged up Slice unleashes the magic attacks Arc, Blast, and Rage Slice. Additionally, the red magic support spells provide various offensive capabilities, such as Charge and Bombardier. In addition to purple and red magic, Frey will gain access to blue and green magic as she progresses on her journey. These magic types also offer a multitude of attack and support spells for Frey to master. Using attack and support spells, gradually charges Frey's surge magic, eventually enabling her to cast an extra powerful spell. Used at the right moment, it can wipe out an entire opposing force in one fell swoop. Frey can also choose to end an opponent by dealing a killer blow, a devastating move she can perform when an enemy is stunned on the ground. Experimenting with different magic types and abilities allows Frey to tailor her combat style to suit any perilous situation. With a wide range of magical abilities at her disposal, Frey will have a multitude of ways to deal with any situation she may encounter. Only after mastering these new abilities will she be able to defend Athia against the corrupting force of the break, and perhaps find a way back home.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Thomas Koop. I'm a lead producer at Flying Wild Hog working on Evil West, and today we're stoked to give you a first look at the game's cooperative multiplayer. We have designed our game to be an exciting, old-school, gore-smashing, vampire-slashing, single-player action first and foremost. Still, if you want to enjoy the entire campaign with your friend, our two-person online co-op has got you covered. Evil West's co-op is simple and straightforward, so both players play as Jesse and only the host progresses the storyline. On the other hand, the challenge grows and some encounters have a slightly different enemy composition to spice things up. Alright, agents, the entire Flying Wild Hog team wishes you a splendiferous trip to the Weird West. Enjoy the gameplay.
thread. It's on me!
Play it day one with Game Pass. The Calisto Protocol is mastering horror. What is fear? Where is it created? As they discuss crafting the perfect horror experience. And how can we use it?
So what happened to the original colony?